you to come out this morning. I teach philanthropy in action at Yale University, and I'm a fan of Bertha's and John, and that's what got me this gig. It's a really exciting time, I think, in America and around the world. It's an exciting time because we actually see young people and others engaged in the Occupy Wall Street movement that has global connotations. And I think we have a lot of lessons that can be learned from the rich experiences of Bertha, who will bring to this conversation her experience as being the leading organizer for Acorn. John Atlas has written a book here called Seeds of Change. Good book, a very lengthy and detailed book. Whenever I have a conversation with John, he points me to which chapter I should read before having a conversation with him. That really offers a lot of meat and content to this conversation. And of course, we're delighted to have our Honorable Senator Kevin Parker, who will bring a lot of perspective as a player in Albany and in his dedication to representing the people of New York. Now, I don't want to take a lot of time, but I will actually ask each of the panelists very briefly to make one point that they're going to start the conversation. And this conversation really will involve all of you. We are not here to lecture you, we are actually here to have a conversation, and my role is to try to be provocateur and to stimulate the conversation. So starting with Senator Parker, we're honored to have you here. You know what this is about. We have seen what a lot of us would believe the tragedy that around the politics that brought down Acorn. And where it has left community organizing in this country. My first question to you is, what do you think you can be doing, and what are you doing, and what are others doing to change to have a game change right now?
So again, good morning, Senator Kevin Parker. I represent the 21st District in Brooklyn, which is Flatbush, East Flatbush, Midwood, Dittmans Park, Kensington, and Borough Park, elected actually in the last redistricting in 2002. I'm the ranking member on the Energy and Telecommunications Committee. I'm happy to be here, and thanks for the opportunity. I think this whole thing that we're dealing with, and particularly as we think about the subject of the idea of inside and outside, is that we have to be clear that everything is about power, leverage, and control. Right? Everything's about power, leverage, and control. This is not about an argument. This is not about convincing society that, of a particular set of facts, and if they understood the facts, that they would then change their minds. This is about power, leverage, and control, and you can only face power, leverage, and control with power, leverage, and control, right? I mean, it's what Frederick Douglass said, right? Power concedes nothing but without demand, right? You can't have the ocean without the roaring sea. So. The pieces that we have to be doing, and the things that we're doing to kind of respond is really about how do we create a leverage on, in my case, the governor and the legislature, and how do we create that leverage, and how do we work together to create that leverage in order to get things done. And although one of the things I think that we really learned from the situation with Acorn is that, at least from my perspective, that we have to protect our friends. And it's not simply enough to be doing the good work. What you saw with Acorn, what you saw with what they tried to do to Bertha, is also what's been done to me. Is that, and what's done to members of the Occupy Wall Street movement, which is the first thing they try to do is criminalize you, right? And try to delegitimize what you're saying so that, for some people your message won't get out, or that your message won't be as strong as it has been. So we have to form circles in order to protect each other.
Bertha, Senator Parker said something that I found fascinating, which he says, it's not about getting the facts out there. It's not about can we agree on what is, I guess, the truth. Given the recent demise of Andrew Breitbart, who apparently really subscribed and implemented what Senator Parker said, which is it didn't matter what the truth was. You could just spin a falsehood, and if you got enough traction on Fox News and elsewhere, it would become the imperative. It would become what people believe. Do you believe that's what happened? And is that something as a strategy you would do, or is that something that you would want to correct?
Well, it's interesting because one of the lessons learned, and you know, Acorn is a case study, but we know we were sort of the canary in the mine. We know the same modus operandi on Ms. Sherrod and Planned Parenthood and Van Jones and on and on down the line. Here's the lesson that we learned. We on the left, need to say that we're on the left and often, we have our culture, our DNA, how we're made is we actually believe you're supposed to tell the truth. I mean, my God, tell the truth. As an organizer, I can tell you, in building New York Acorn, whenever we would do a campaign, say it was on, housing, we'd get our study and, write it all up and check and double check and triple check the facts because, we had to be correct and we had to be right. Acorn was guilty of being naive and not realizing that when your enemy wants to take you down, all is fair and love and war, and that we are at war, that they can tell a lie. We just were unprepared for a lie because we're like, that's not fair. That's not fair. You don't do that. Also, lies have been told before, but somehow or another we didn't take that seriously as if that really, in fact, was a strategy that would keep going.
Bertha,
we thought it was just the individual. And here's the other thing. The echo chamber, the internet, Fox News, right-wing radio, this is what made the lie now serious and important as opposed to when lies were put in print and you didn't have this big megaphone.
Right. So, the part I find puzzling about what you just said is if you look at the history of educating around social justice and the entire work of the philanthropic sector in the last 150 years in the South, post-Reconstruction or during Reconstruction and post-Reconstruction, it is hard to understand how one could be naive. So, explain how you could be naive. And it's not just you and Acorn. How could the left, the philanthropic left, how could the American Congress left be naive as to the machinations of the right?
Well, I may not be able to explain it. I'm just telling you.
Right.
That's the word that I use for it, or naivete, or maybe it's arrogance. We're doing God's work. We're the good guys, and good guys sort of like move along. Also, I know for our organization, we didn't anticipate that kind of attack, and we didn't have the infrastructure to deal with that kind of attack. And also, I think part of the lessons that we need to learn about those of us who are progressive and on the left is you can't operate in silos. When one is attacked, I don't care what you think about that organization, whether or not you think, they really are effective, or, those guys over there, we have this snobbishness about us, so we put our own selves in the silos, and then it's like we let perfect be the enemy of good. I heard many times from other organizations, and they will say, when someone asks them, why didn't you come to the defense of Acorn? Well, we had problems with them, either you're not pure enough, or we don't like your methodology. But also, let's be honest about this. We were a black and brown organization, organizing poor people. Now, I don't know if people are, now that they've seen the old attacks, and maybe they're a little bit better at it, but people didn't go online to give us $3 million in 48 hours like they did for Planned Parenthood. There was an uprising, and it was white women under attack. We're a 40-year-old organization. Anyone that saw those tapes could see how outlandish and ridiculous it was. But, we couldn't get anyone to come online. If we had gotten, a third of what, Planned Parenthood got, we could have survived. But, folks shied away. So we were just as guilty on the left of sort of aiding and abetting the enemy. So yes, you're naive in that you don't anticipate the most scurrilous strategies and things that folks will do to you. It may be because you think, that you're doing such good work, and of course you're working, and you didn't have a mechanism for doing that.
Well, here is what, in the field that I research, which is philanthropy, I always find it fascinating when you look at the way wonderful, well-meaning people who, especially, I'm restricting myself now to the South, but this is really throughout the country, are interested in social justice and interested in affecting the power dynamic between the browns and the blacks and the whites. So that...
Well, I have to stop you there.
Let me finish the point. But at the point of resistance, right, where the segregationist Southerners felt this could affect the power dynamic that Senator Parker referred to, then you immediately compromised. And you did what you skirted around the issue that then disempowered. What I thought was significant, but not surprising, Bertha, about what happened with Acorn is that, 100 years after I could give an example of this, and 50 years after I can give an example of this, and 10 years after it recurred in this current century, this millennium, that you saw the same thing. The philanthropic community went running, didn't they?
Oh, well, the first ones was our so-called progressive foundations. And this is why you cannot rely on the kindness of strangers. Lesson to organizations. Self-sufficiency is not just some buzzword or some phrase. People, what you understand is these foundations, their boards of directors are composed of folks from Wall Street. Okay? Rich families, that. So these are the very folks that most of us are fighting against. Now, ain't nobody gonna really pay you to beat them up. So philanthropy, and especially left philanthropy, will only go so far. As long as you're giving out turkeys and blankets and things like that, fine. Do not, it's just rhetoric. We want to affect the power dynamic. No, you don't. Because you got 400,000 black and brown families, poor people, that composed our organization that it took 40 years to build, by the way. They don't want 400,000 families, the largest poverty organization in this country, to be just as equal as they are. The other thing is, and a lot of you know who run organizations know, that you write the proposal, right? And for years we couldn't even say organizing. It had to be civic engagement. Empowering, right? Because you're not supposed, you can get funding to do social services or be advocates. We will fund you to advocate, but not to organize.
Okay, but Bertha, I want to push back on one thing you said. Because it wasn't just Wall Street, and it wasn't just a white power structure. Why do you think it was so easy for black people to also throw you under the bus?
Like the president?
And why was it also easy for black organizations, after your example, the example of Acorn, to then fall victim to Andrew Breitbart? The NAACP already knew Breitbart and O'Keefe. The White House already knew the story of that, and they succumbed with the Van Jones, as you mentioned, and the NAACP succumbed to the Shirley Sherrod fiasco. Why? Is it that we have thick skulls and we don't get it? How?
No,
why
there's
is
an
it
arrogance it is the arrogance of the good guy. That was them. That's not us, And also, just to be honest, and I want to be honest in this space, so share these thoughts. And I don't mean to deride any religion, but how folks always talk about, Catholic guilt and Catholics feel guilty. It's almost as if those of us on the left feel guilty somehow. And like we're never good enough, we're never doing this enough. We feel guilty. The other thing is that, I want to go back to the point, we're all like frenemies, where we just don't think that this thing is going to come. Because we have to, remember now, we always tell the truth and we have to be perfect. So it's like if you have this little thing, you got to move over there because we won't be able to get our point across. We don't want any besmirchment or any taint. So we're harsher on each other. On the right, they don't give a damn. This is our family. This is, what we want to do. And you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to, do everything correctly. And, they circle the wagon. But, we are so, it seems, let me just give you an example. And in 2008, Acorn, one organization, accounted for 25% of all the voter registration in this country. Think about that. In the entire country, 25%. When President Obama was running, and during that summer, and someone asked him about, these Acorn people, voter registration. Well, I don't need them I don't deal with them on voter registration. It's always, if you're not quite perfect, because somebody makes an excuse. Again, rather than immediately, give your fellow leftists the benefit of the doubt.
You know, Harry Belafonte has a new memoir out that is worth reading called Sing My Song. And
He's our President of the Year, by the way.
I couldn't agree more. And,
He deserves that.
I'm moderating a conversation with Harry Belafonte on April 11th at Yale, so you're all invited. But he would say the reason that we don't give each other the benefit of the doubt is a learned behavior.
Yes.
Coming from a system of which it works.
That's right.
But I want John, who's been pushing him into this conversation, and who wrote this book, Seeds of Change, and John has brought a clip because John and I are helping to produce a documentary, and we have a clip to show you. John, do you want to start with the clip?
Yeah, let me just introduce the clip for you. There are some things that you're going to look for when you see this. You're going to see somebody very familiar. Bertha Lewis will be there. You're going to see Fox News and other TV commentators commenting on what is going on with Acorn. And then you're going to see some other people who are involved in Acorn. Somebody who was accused of promoting prostitution or helping prostitutes. And you're also going to see the founder of Acorn. You'll see he's wearing a white shirt in there. And so I'm just helping orient you to think about who you're seeing when you see the characters on
Get
this.
somebody to turn off the light.
Oh, could somebody turn off the light?
Over there in this corner. Oh, that's good.
Thank you, Dan.
So we could get direct responses to that. Well, we could talk about whatever people want to do. I just
John,
want to
let
say
me
about-
moderate.
Okay, but I just want to say, explain by what.
You are producing, helping produce this documentary. Why?
Well, for 40 years, I was what I would consider on the front lines of fighting against injustice, fighting against poverty, fighting to promote a progressive agenda in America. And I wore many hats. I was the executive director of a very progressive legal services program. Mixim actually was a partner in that leadership. I helped organize tenants through the New Jersey Tenant Organization. I helped organize a group called New Jersey Citizen Action, which was also a progressive statewide organization, founded a magazine called Shelter Force. I even had a radio program with BAI. I continually wrote about my experiences in the New York Times, Huffington Post, and elsewhere. And it occurred to me about 5 years ago, had people like me, who were active in the 60s and 70s, had we made any difference? Was it 2 steps forward and 3 steps back? So I looked around for a way to tell that story in a book. It ended up being Seeds of Change, and I had decided to pick Acorn. I knew a little bit about Acorn, because I heard that they were doing something more than making a little difference. I heard that they were making a big difference. And I'm sure as everybody here knows, because you're all active in something, how hard it is to make just a small difference. So I thought, well, here's a group that appears to be making a big difference. Well, why don't I investigate this as, do an honest report, see whether it's true, and if it is true, how did they do it? And then I would use that as a frame to understand the last 40 years, because Acorn actually began in 1970. So you see, that's how I was going to tell the story about whether or not the post-60s, post-70s activists really made any difference. So that's what drove me to write this book.
Okay, so let me open it up. So, yes.
So, and I say this.
Well, I just want to interrupt one thing, because I don't think we properly introduced our moderator. Maxim Thorne is a professor at Yale, But he's also, I helped put this panel together, and the reason why I was urging these two to come and talk to you was because not only was Acorn making a significant difference, but Mixim has been involved in several kinds of organizations, including, by the way, he was vice president of that group called the NAACP that we referred to earlier. He was also vice president of the Human Rights Campaign. So he has been, we now have at least 3 organizations that we can call on to say, well, we know what happened in the past a little, we need to know more. We'd like to know what you're doing now, and based on your own experience, what is it, what should we be doing in this post-Occupy Wall Street time, where the national debate for the first time in 40 years, and it was before this book came out, has changed from how we're going to cut the deficit, how we're going to make the rich richer, how we're going to deregulate Exxon and Enron and private corporations so that they can unleash the private power of the market, to what are we going to do to rein in the rich, what are we going to do to rein in the rich and powerful, how are we going to fight for equality. In other words, the whole conversation has changed. So now, more than ever, we need to know what groups in the last 40 years were doing that were successful. So that's why we got 2 experts here. I helped write a book. I'll try to keep them honest.
Right. And to keep it honest, I was the senior vice president of the NAACP. And I'm not a tenure professor at Yale, but I teach as a professor at Yale. But you have a question.
And I say this as somebody who, 20 years working with Acorn in various ways. I was the executive director of a group where Acorn was on the board. But what struck me about this whole debacle, and I was in a group that reached out to support, most people didn't know who Acorn was. And when you talk about the difference with Planned Parenthood, whatever you want to say, yes, the racial issue is real, but I also think just the recognition. And here's the irony. More conservatives, before this videotape came out, knew about Acorn, because if you watch Glenn Beck, and if you listen to Rush Limbaugh, this wasn't like a one-day campaign. They had spent years. If anybody ever saw Glenn Beck's chalkboard, where he showed all the relationships between various groups. And the irony is, to this day, if I want to know the relationships between left groups, on a basic level, I can go to right-wing sites and find it more easily than the left, because the left doesn't talk about each other. They don't educate well. Part of it's the funding dynamic. I did it all. It wasn't us working together. But it's also a fundamental, and I'll tie this to something else, which is, it's very hard to join the Occupy movement. And the connection is this. I talk to my political but not organized friends. And for them, it's like, who saw Alinsky? They've never heard of it. People on the right have. They talk about Alinskyite tactics. If you read a right-wing site, all they, Alinsky. Left-wingers, we don't educate well unless you're in an organizing group. But it's also, but you learn about this stuff when you join something. And the left, outside of the groups that organize, and if you don't learn it, and we don't have an easy way to join the left. And I have to say, this is a fundamental criticism of Occupy, is there was no easy way. I knew people who were walking by the site every day, wanted to join, and they felt no entry point. And it's, there's a lot of stuff around anti-hierarchical stuff, but part of anti-hierarchical stuff becomes no way to join.
Okay,
and
thank you.
So that's the question, is how do you deal with it?
Well, I want to riff off of that, because one of the things that we were noting earlier before the forum started was the Occupy movement, I think, has accomplished at least 2 things. One, it has frightened the power. I mean, I think Wall Street was very frightened by the Occupy movement, and 2, has changed the conversation to the extent that you read about the the 1%, the 99%, and so forth. But I think the Occupy movement has done little to nothing to actually build power and create institutions of power that people can join and that can genuinely replace the existing power structures, or at least come up with substitutes. So I guess my question might be, in the wake of the tragic demise of Acorn, how can we take advantage of the Occupy movement to build new Acorns or revitalize unions or other membership groups that can really institutionalize and make permanent this movement that otherwise is sort of seasonal in nature?
Well, let me put those 2 together to you, Bertha, in this way. You laughingly talked about some of the legal restrictions that you operated under, in that you were doing voter education. You weren't doing advocacy. And you said some of the word choices you had to use to make sure your funders were happy, and to also keep the IRS off your back. And one of the challenges for progressive organizations over the century has been how to ensure that they operate without the tentacles of the IRS coming in and attacking them. But there's been a recent change at the Supreme Court level that has a double edge that benefits you, that people don't talk about, and that is Citizens United. So Citizens United has resoundingly been denounced by the President of the United States, but it was a non-profit group, Citizens United, that brought this case. And in many ways, that case allows organizations like Acorn and other nonprofit groups and others to now engage fully in political discourse. It says that you can spend this much money. It erases, in many ways, the distinction that we have operated on that separates political advocacy versus educating around public policy. Isn't that something that you can actually now talk about more freely?
No. Because again, his point was right. And it's just like something in the DNA or congenital or whatever. We don't talk about ourselves as well as we should. Acorn is a 40-year-old organization. And we were going through this whole transition saying, how can we brand ourselves better? And we need to, and we were evolving. And even when the criticism of some of our funders was like, you need to tell your story better. But, like my grandmother would say, if you don't say who you are, somebody else will. And so we do get defined by that. The other thing is, and I want what Harry Belafonte said about learned behavior, that when we criticize each other, and it's like white folks know more about black history than some black folks do. It's the same thing. The right knows more about the left than the left does. And it is weird. But what did Gandhi say? First they ignore you. I think we kind of believed their propaganda, because we were always worried, like, we're not big enough, we're not working enough, we gotta work harder. There are still restraints on us. Citizens United only codified what was already going on. And put up some little structure around it. But this was already, this kind of speech. But if you were a nonprofit organization like ours, this 501c3, and you're only supposed to advocate. We had a structure where we did not have a designation at all, because you become strangled by it. And it wasn't, again, it's not fair, and I don't know why it is, but when we on the left talk politics, that's supposed to be taboo, or that's a no-no. It's like why I was so happy to have Senator Parker here, because everything is politics. The water you drink, air, dust, everything is political.
And we can't be scared of that.
And here's the thing, we used to teach in our leadership training about power, right? And it really is peculiar, because a lot of folks on the left just want to do God's work and do good and be just, and don't think about power. You need real power. Power is not good or bad. It is just the ability to act. And that would be one of the first sort of training sessions that we would have with our member leaders. So they would be, oh no, I don't really want any power. So what do we have to do? We, in fact, we got to spend money. We are not taking advantage of the expansion of Citizens United as we should. The right is on it. But, you know, just as our funders ran away from us, you don't have left funders or people, what? The news every 15 minutes. Occupy Wall Street getting ready to run out of money. Ain't nobody giving them no money anymore. Haven't you been hearing that?
Yeah.
Haven't you been hearing that? That's supposed to be news. Repeated over and over. But, you know, we should be ashamed of ourselves if we're not giving Occupy Wall Street. You know, you want to get some money, you'll have an entryway. I guarantee you that. www, whatever. You'll have an entryway. So the first thing is that, these foundations and philanthropists should be challenged. And we should just demand that, give me some money, damn it, so that I can build power, so that groups can have political speech. And we're not ashamed of it, and we don't shy away from it, and we really become really, really, really political. And yes, liberal is not a bad word, and they will call you names. So what? So what? The more name calling and the more attacks you get, I think, the harder you work, and you need to get up in
You know
their
what?
face.
I'd like to come back. I've been to like 40, because of my book, I've been doing a national tour. I go everywhere. I've discussed about Acorn. Never had such an interesting question and observation. What's your name?
Nathan.
That David made. Nathan, I'm sorry. About why, I think this goes in many ways to the core of what, for example, the question I was curious about is why did Acorn go down? And I think that you raised that fascinating question to me, and that is, how come the left doesn't know more about the left?
They don't have a network.
And why is it that even in a forum like this, why is it, maybe this is exaggerating the point, but why isn't somebody like Bertha at one of the big plenaries who has led an organization that has done more to bring about social change than anybody else who's going to be speaking on any of these panels? What is it now? I don't believe in conspiracy. I believe that there's an analytical reason behind that, and just throw that out for people to discuss here, who are involved in public employee unions, who are involved in the left. I wish, and Mixim, from the NAACP, let me start with our panelists. From the NAACP, why is it that people in the NAACP don't know anything about Acorn?
Well, I wouldn't say that we don't know anything about Acorn.
You know very little.
I would say, I think that there is an unholy dynamic that you see, which is the NAACP, which has survived, as opposed to SNCC and many others. And the question is, I think it's great that the NAACP survived, but there are lots of bad reasons of why the NAACP and other organizations survived. Because they were less threatening. They were willing to make compromises. And so, I can argue that there are a lot of other organizations and movements that got killed off or that served their purpose and we would have wanted to survive. And then there were others that were positioned to reap the benefits, one of which was the NAACP. In a whole system, you need both, right? Oftentimes the agitators go down and the rest of us benefit. The rest of us being people of my generation, people who are younger, Barack Obama benefits from a lot of people who would never have gotten elected, could not have been elected because of their activism, because of pushing this. And I think you need both. And the tragedy is that some people get arrested and create a record that later makes them ineligible for office. But you need those people, and that's part.
So let me follow up and say, so you're basically saying that this is the process of progressive social change, and that there's really probably nothing we can do to have organizations like the Black Panthers, like SNCC, like so many other groups that end up going down the tubes, and that this is sort of like evolution.
No, I'm not saying that. I actually think that we have a chance to change things. And there are ways in which we have changed things. So if you talk with civil rights leaders who came out of that moment in time of the 50s and 60s, there was a very deliberate strategy of keeping Charlene Hunter, who became Charlene Hunter Galt, clean and pure. There was a deliberate... Charlene Hunter Galt does anyone not know who Charlene Hunter is?
The generational thing.
And that's a fascinating, right. So she integrated the University of Georgia, a young black woman. And so while she's a childhood friend of Julian Bond, and a childhood friend of Andrew Young, and a childhood friend and is known, she's selected from childhood that you will be the one who will integrate the University of Georgia. So you're not going to come on the marches with us. And I moderated a panel between her and Julian Bond. And they knew we're going to make sure that she doesn't get arrested, that even though she wants to do it, because we have to make sure when you go out there, there's nothing they could say about you.
Can I jump in here real quick?
Sure.
This is really one of the important things. So some of you don't know, people came late. I'm Senator Parker. I represent the 21st District in Brooklyn. In addition to that, I'm also a Black Studies professor. So this is one of the things that...
One of the few progressive legislators.
Yeah. This is one of the things that we really need to learn, and we take nothing else, is that we have to be better at planning. Movements are organized. And we have gotten to this thing that we think that movements are just spontaneous and random, and that is part of what hurts us. So part of what you're seeing is a lack of organization. So speaking of SNCC, one of my mentors coming up was Stokely Carmichael, right? Kwame Ture. He always said to me, black people have organizations. Our problem is organizations aren't organized. Our struggle is to organize our organizations. The left has organizations. Our problem is our organizations aren't organized. And we have to understand in the structure in which we're operating and operate in a context. And part of what we shy away from is the things that we see in our oppressor, and we see them as positive and negative forces, as opposed to what Bertha has indicated about power, which is being a neutral force, right? The force is the force, right? When the Jedi are using it, it's for good. When the Dark Lords and the Sith are using it, it's bad. But the force is the force, right? And we must become Jedi. We must learn.
Jedis for justice.
Yes. we must learn the way of power, right? We have to learn the way, and we have to organize ourselves in a way to happen. So part of what you're talking about is not just something that's happened. Charlie Hunter Galt was chosen. It was an organizing strategy, and it was. So when you look at Baird Rustin, who's not talked about nearly enough, is a hero because Baird Rustin was the major tactician of the civil rights movement. He was this person kind of in the back, but the person like, okay, these are how we're going to move the chess pieces. And that's what we're not having now. We're playing checkers, right?
And they playing chess.
And they're playing chess. And so they're 3 or 4 moves ahead of us. And we are slow to employ the same tactics that our enemies are using, right? This is a war. Right?
So how does that happen?
Wait, hold on.
How does that happen is that you organize yourself, that you marshal your resources, and you put them into play.
Well, let's unpack this
And
week.
you build organizations.
Wait, so let's unpack this we. So here's who in the we I think have altered strategy very successfully. The gay rights people. They've had astonishing success.
Yes, because they're run by white men,
Right.
and they have money. I mean, let's not not get it twisted, right? They're run by white men and they have money,
No, I disagree.
and they're well educated.
It changed.
So we have
Okay.
a lot of black people with money who are educated, who are more than willing to throw Bertha and Akon under the bus.
That's right.
So the question is, what do we learn from the success of gay white organizations and the lack of success? I would argue that the most successful gay rights organization right now is one that none of you have heard of, but you should, which is AFER, right? Which is the American Foundation for Equal Rights. Anyone heard of this?
No.
Well, AFER is the group, a new group that has brought Perry versus Schwarzenegger. Perry versus Schwarzenegger is the case that overturned Prop 8 in California. Why is it that Lambda Legal, and all of you have heard of the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force, HRC, weren't there to do it? Because they adopted a whole new strategy. A strategy which was sophisticated and different, which is to say, they looked at the landscape and said, what could we do differently to actually break away from what the other groups were doing? And one of the things that they did is they recognized how power operates within the legal system, learning from the Black Civil Rights Movement. And they hired, which is unique, the two most famous lawyers of this generation, right? They hired Ted Olson and David Boies to bring the gay marriage case in the courts. Now think about how that is different. Normally, we want pro bono service. We want to use our institution. We don't want to pay them. We want to limit what resources our organizations have, and everyone should do it for free. If you're doing good, you should do it, with a vow of poverty. AFER said, we're not doing that. Our rights mean a lot to us, and we should be able to pay top dollar to the top lawyers to bring this case. And we've seen the results. They've won in California, they've won in the Ninth Circuit, and it's on its way to the Supreme Court. I think one can learn a lot from that.
What could we learn?
That we don't get our rights and the vindication of our rights and systemic change by getting it for free. By wanting to do it on the cheap. That we want everyone to do this on a voluntary basis at minimum wage or less than
By the
minimum
way, I'd like to
wage.
turn that into one of the fundamental reasons why Acorn succeeded for 4 decades was because they had members paid dues, and that was the fundamental basis to pay their organizers. And actually, one little truth and consequences. When Acorn was organizing, started in '70 up till about 1995, 80% of its budget came from dues. From that period on, from '95 until more recently, that number reversed if you consider all the Acorn operations. Now, on the one hand, getting more money, not relying on dues, allowed Acorn to raise to 500, 1,000 staff. You don't go to left-wing organizations and see 500,000 staff hanging around. Acorn built itself to that large group, but they had to do it by going beyond relying totally on their members. And one could actually argue that one of the reasons Acorn unraveled so quickly, besides having a ferocious attack that was unexpected from the Republicans and the right-wing corporations and the Fox News, was that imbalance. I'm not saying that is the cause, I'm just saying that I'm drawing a link between what you're saying about this innovative gay rights group with Acorn, which is you got to be independent, you got to be self-sufficient, you got to pay for your staff, and you can't rely on volunteers and people working, after they've had a hard day's work at another job.
And the same argument is made with Mercy Corps. Mercy Corps doesn't use volunteers. People know Mercy Corps, the International Relief Agency. They pay all of their workers. It is a fascinating thing to me that all these kids are lining up overnight to buy the new iPad at $500+. But we have not altered a culture that says even give a percentage of that for social change. To spend $50 towards Occupy Wall Street and investing in ourselves. We're a country that believes in market-based solutions for our problems, but we have not engaged with the market to have our community then figure out a way in which, given outside of the context of the church and tithings, how to get our own folks engaged monetarily in investing
Right.
for social change.
But you've got to ask, I mean,
Or the community campaigns.
Right, you gotta get
Kevin's
asked,
response on
and-
that, wait, before we go, what's your response to, because you had a different reason for saying the gay movement was so powerful.
Well, I don't think necessarily think that what Maxim said contradicts what I said, right? Again, I having especially worked, been one of the people who voted, for gay marriage. I know who came to see me, right? And I know who the major leaders are in the gay community who come to see me. It wasn't black and brown lesbians, all right? So I don't think that's saying a different thing. And I would have to look at the board of this organization. I bet you would find a bunch of, and that's wrong with that. But gay white men who are probably Ivy League educated, the lawyers, the doctors, whatever, and that's fine. And that's how it has to come. I think that doesn't invalidate Maxim's point, which is that. But I want to add to his point. Not only do we need to pay for things, but we need to fund our own liberation. You can't be reliant on corporate dollars, right?
you're gonna fight the corporate.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. Walmart's not going to fund its own demise, right? So you can't be organized against Walmart and then asking Walmart's foundation for money, right? And so finding a way to raise money out of our own communities is critical. And last point is that, again, that also, and again, I have a personal stake in this, also means elected officials. So, right, so if I have to spend my time and energy going to the real estate board and to Walmart to fund my reelection, right, that puts a different set of pressures on me than if I can get money out of this room, right? So speaking of that, I need 10 people with $100. But watch the rules, sorry.
Get right up to the end. No, this is lessons learned, and you got to tell the truth about this stuff. He's right. This is a war. This isn't recreation. I used to tell new organizers that would come to interview to be an Acorn organizer. And one thing about us was, if you came to work for Acorn and you worked for 2 weeks and put Acorn on your resume, people loved you because they knew what kind of ethic we had. I, would say, listen, part of our success was we took this seriously. And I said, look, you either want to talk about organizing or you want to organize. What is an organizer? An organizer organizes organizations. And the more organizations that we have, that is power. There's power in numbers. So we need more organizations. We also need money, and not to be ashamed of it, and not, to say, oh, we can't use some of the tactics, strategies of our oppressor. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. And we need to say how to do it. 1%, there's a 1%. We go 1% versus the 99%. Well, here's a 1% solution. And when I created the Black Institute, I just got fed up and pissed off. And that's why it's the Black Institute. Yeah, that's right. Blackity black, black, the blackity black. I'm like, I just got tired of folks not saying the way it is. If the country is going to be a majority-minority country, then we need to look at things from an of-color point of view. That becomes the universal view. And to be unapologetic about it. I didn't want to, we are focused, and our lens is the point of view of Black people and people of color in the U.S. and throughout diaspora. It's just, let's, just like tiptoe around talking about race, on the left, we tiptoe around talking about money. I decided also that the Institute, my main thing would be self-sufficiency, and that I would not, take government money. First of all, it's a hassle, and it's far too much like infrastructure. I'd be paying accountants more than what I actually would use the money for. But that you needed to challenge the establishment. We have black millionaires. I don't know if we have any black billionaires, but I'm certainly going to try to find them wherever they are.
Kobe's ex-wife.
And you got to go and just step to them and challenge them. I was at NYU and I was talking about black banks, which is an endangered species. There used to be hundreds of black-owned banks, coming right out of Reconstruction. Hundreds, and now we're down to 38, 39. Is that right, Ebony? 39, right now. And I asked, there was a whole room of black MBA graduates. They are all advanced degrees, and so I said, how many of you know how many black banks there are? And this very well-educated group said 2 or 3. So I said, the good news is there's 39. The bad news is that you didn't know that. And then I asked, how many of you know where the black bank is here in New York? No one knew. Someone said, they cheat now. These and I said, yes. How many of you have any money in Carver? Not a one. Not a one. So to me, I'm saying, look, and I told them, y'all leave this room. Now you could stay with Chase or Citi, whomever, but you leave this room and you put $25 into Carver. I just did a thing on my website. Because I want money. I'm telling you, he wants a contribution.
Okay, we got the point.
But part of what my institution will do is do as you say. Use that strategy to go after money so that I can actually do this real work.
Right. But here is the contradiction, which I want to ask. I don't see how what you said is not a paradox. On the one end, you have demonized the 1%, which is the creation of this incredible amount of wealth. And at the same time you say, I need to find the black billionaires to invest in.
That's right.
Because I would argue that an America of all countries is a country, you could see this, there has been a way in which people in the 1% have been the same people who have been investing in reform. And that the people who have been resisting reform are not necessarily the billionaires.
Oh, I see.
Right? I don't think Warren Buffett is resisting reform. And I don't think the Rockefeller family have been resisting reform. Wait, let me finish my point. And I think one has to take a very nuanced view. This is not to say we don't take on Walmart or we don't take on many of the serious problems that we see structurally. But I think that one has to do a very interesting dance with philanthropy and towards reform. If you're going to actually get
But
people...
you know that they're only going to go so far. They want real reform, because this is what happened to us when all of the so-called progressive foundations pulled out. They say they want to change the power dynamic. So they can fool themselves all they want. What is a 1% solution? If 1%, if the NBA, if black NBA players gave 1% of their money to Carver Bank, right? Carver would not have to.
It would be dramatic. So wait. So how come?
So let's use their money against them.
When Planned Parenthood was threatened, when the Komen Foundation was going to pull their money from Planned Parenthood, a lot of people owned that issue. A lot of women and men owned that issue and said, we're not going to allow this to happen. and you saw the CEO of Planned Parenthood take to the airwaves and have access to the airwaves, and Coleman reversed itself. Why is it that the black NBA players and the NFL players don't own
Acorn.
Acorn?
I'll tell you what. Two reasons.
That's a good
And again, and Bertha made this point, in the very
That's a great
beginning,
question.
is that Planned Parenthood again is white women, right? Who because of their relationship with white men have some resources on some strata, right? Not nearly as much, but have some resources. And so you saw that response. And part of what you have with black athletes, and this is saying this. First time I've ever been ashamed to say this. I went to Penn State. So, having gone to Penn State and knowing, athletes, professional athletes, they don't see themselves in the same situation, although they came out of those circumstances, as the black and brown people who are being represented by Acorn. Most of them, because of their experiences both in high school and in college, were honorary whites. Right, and so don't necessarily have developed a consciousness that says I need to give back, I need to bring people forward, and that's part of what we talked about in the very beginning. That there's an internalized racism amongst blacks and Latinos in particular that's pervasive and that stops people from doing things in their own interests.
Right. Well, obviously Tyler Perry, I would argue, is an example of someone who is in fact investing his money philanthropically.
Not an athlete.
Not an athlete. But I would also say that they are people who are in the business of entertainment and entertainers who are similar to the athletes who are not giving the way that they should. You've been wanting to say something for a while.
Yeah,
Yes.
sorry.
Give your name and tell us a little bit about yourself and then ask.
Okay, sorry, I'm still trying to think about how to formulate this. I'm Natalie, and I work for a international feminist organization. So thanks so much for everything so far. But so I think, okay, so a few things. I think it's much easier to fight. So I think this speaks to the Planned Parenthood phenomena, at least one component. And maybe when we talk about progressive foundations in this country, or some, it's much easier to fight for equality, I think. People are much more comfortable to fight for equality within a liberal framework, within a liberal democratic system, right? And when you're and Planned Parenthood fits within that. So you're fighting for equality, a particular type of equality within the system, right? I think. It's much harder to fight for something else, and particularly for systemic reform, complete systemic reform, right? So, and I think this speaks also to what we're talking about when we're talking about issues of organizing and the left. And I think Senator Parker's point about how the left has organizations, right? And those organizations are not organized. Some are and some are not. But what the bigger question is, and it speaks to funding trends, funding has often served to undermine social movements, fragment social movements, NGOize social movements, right? And then the funding goes to those NGOs that are less threatening, i.e. less, putting forward less of a systemic critique, not saying things like capitalism sucks. For example, I'm just, right? So I think my question, or what I'm trying to think about is, given that we do have really potent ideological differences within the left, so we have political, ideological differences within the left, and when we talk about what this other sort of place or system could look like, another way of organizing economy, another way of living, or, reform strategies within capitalism and other ways of living within capitalism too. How do we grapple with, in organizing the left, these very real differences in ideology?
You just let it go. You don't give a damn about it. Here's the thing. Be true to your own principles. These little squabbles and, I'm a communist. No, I'm a socialist. No, I'm a moderate. All of that is bullshit. You know, if we're on the left, we are on the left. And there's every kind of left stripe. Just like, you know, in being black. You could be black and look like, you know, Irish Kevin here, and then, you know, be blacker than, you know, it's a whole range. We have got to stop it. We have got to say and stop being absolutists. If you're on the left, embrace your brothers and your sisters and let them be and stop giving a damn. If they are not the enemy, they are your friend. Now, and stop the frenemy bullshit. You know, I was reminded of that song, you know, they're smiling in your face all the time, they want to take your place, the backstabbers. and we do that to each other. We do that. Also, you know, and we empower people to do that.
So Bertha, we do that. What's to stop it from continuing?
Just stop it. People like us saying, stop it. It's okay to stop it. And also, we now what's good about, you know, the metamorphosis of Acorn, not the demise, the metamorphosis of Acorn, is that when this attack came in the way that it is, it's polarized things and it's stark. And so, in order for us to live and survive, we know what the problem is. We challenge each other and just stop it.
Okay,
And
so
we
I
gotta
don't
keep
think that's
it.
going to do it enough.
No.
Let's hear from other people.
So, yes, ma'am.
In response to what you were saying, I think that when Ms. Lewis said that, you know, stop the division
Stop
between
the hating.
Yeah, stop hating. I think that, you know, that's a testament to, like, when black women try to form organizations, well, when white women try to form organizations, black women jump on and we support. However, when black women want to form organizations, we're so small and so tight and there isn't a single white face in the crowd. And you'll find that white women will pull back and say, oh, well, because I'm not black, this is not my problem, and we'll let the black women fight on this on their own. And instead, like, it's like, you know, I'm not saying that only black women get it, but what I'm saying is that if you only recognize the differences between us, then you will find very few white faces in not just a women's organization, but just in organizations in general, and especially left organizations. I don't know if there's, you know, like what you were saying, like white guilt, where it feels like, you know, I'm not oppressed enough, so I should not, if I'm white, I'm not oppressed enough, so I should not belong to this organization. But just being a part of that organization, if it's black, sign up, you know, give money. You know, recognizing that, you know, these are human rights issues. You know, black people cry at the same soap operas, you know, that you know, we cry at Lifetime, on Lifetime shows too. So it's not like we're fundamentally different, you know. So I'm saying all that to say that, you know, I'm with Ms. Bertha on this one, and
I see.
Right,
Excuse me, I'm going to interrupt you. But I'd like to do it, John. But I'd like to do it. A lot of people came in late,
I am
so I
the
want to
moderator, John. I'm the moderator.
I'm the decider.
And I'm the browner between the two. So I think there's a lesson learned. At the National Equality March, which you just gave me the idea when you said that, I introduced Julian Bond at the Gay Rights March, and he was the keynote at the Gay Rights March in Washington. That's a lesson learned about how you integrate for change and how you actually push an agenda that has a quantum leap forward, right? But we don't do enough like that. We are still modeling, I think, bad segregationist behavior. And some of the left issues that you're talking about, you actually see being modeled by the right now. You have the ears to segregation, right? Newt Gingrich and Santorum, I would say, are the ears to the segregationist folks. and their constituencies are purists.
Yeah, you're not pure enough.
And they're doing the "we are not pure enough, we don't want to support whatever it is that Mitt Romney is." And so it's a fascinating thing to see, and God bless them for modeling the bad behaviors that we are saying we want to move away from, right? Yes.
Be true to your principles, as Bertha said, but I think it's equally, if not more important, that we be true to our interests. Senator Parker's remark about black athletes being honorary whites reminded me about how utterly lacking class consciousness Americans are. That it's true that these athletes may still be black, but they're now wealthy. So they've moved beyond the interests that they may have previously had as poor people. And I think that's something that we need to do a lot more of, is calling out the fact that whether you're black or white or green or blue or gray, it's not just a question of the 99% versus the 1%. I mean, there's the 50%, there's the 30%, there's the 20%, and that's a lot of people, that bottom 30, 40, 50%. And if there's a way that we could take advantage of the Occupy movement to organize poor people's movements,
Okay.
and poor people's organizations.
From Canada, you had a comment, and then you in front.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting because this is probably what we should expect in Toronto, in Canada, 5 years from now, in terms of the the targeting of the groups that are doing the real work.
Get ready.
I just want to maybe ask Ms. Lewis, in terms of the grassroots organizing, aside from raising money and all that, how would you do it differently when they're attacking? If you look back now,
How would I have done it
differently, or in terms of tenant organizing, and what's going on now after ACON has?
No, that has not. I mean, responding to the attack.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, as I said, I don't know if we could have done anything differently because we weren't prepared. We didn't have that infrastructure to get back. Now, we were deluged. So, and again, we had our own fault lines, so that you have your weak points. We were, as John said, we were not as self-sufficient as we should have been. I mean, I used to.
Are you more self-sufficient now?
The new state groups are.
Right.
Because that was a hard lesson to learn, and also better managed. You be proud of your organization. Just because we're on the left and just because we're organizing people doesn't mean that we should have sloppy internal structures.
Well, Bertha, I want to ask you a tough question.
Wait,
Why weren't you able to?
John, I'm going to this part. John,
I know, but why were you not able to mobilize your own members?
We did mobilize our own members, John. I was there. We did.
That's a criticism.
We only were able to be on life support. I mean, our members, in the end, when the rich folks ran away and the foundations ran away and corporations ran away
And the politicians ran away.
and the politicians
We the first ones.
certainly ran away. It was us and our members with dues that we were able. Again, we went full circle, right? It wasn't enough because, you gotta hire lawyers to defend you and accountants and this and produce all of the paper. It wasn't just Fox attacks. It was producing one document after another and all like that. But in the end, it was our members and their dues that allowed us to reorganize.
So people should understand that I used to work for John. I don't work for John anymore. And I organized tenants in Patterson when John was executive director and I became deputy executive director. So this is over a decade going on.
Brother, you came right back to what I wanted to get back at, which the conversation before you were talking about basically, how, by one side, how do you finance something when contradictorily you're looking to the exact same people whose interests are not yours, right? And I just wanted to bring.
Don't answer your
You need class traders.
Okay, you want to add to that?
That's a good question.
You want
No, but it's not.
Wait,
Oh, you-
That's not his question.
I wanted to add to it, to bring in this idea of what the senator was saying about organizing our organizations. Because on the right, we may say, well, all their organizations are so organized, but let's not remember, let's not forget, it's the same circle of very money people that are funding all these organizations. That in the way, if you want to put the left's web of right organizations, it's coming more to a source than Rush Limbaugh or whoever Glenn Beck could ever show us on the left, right? So I want to know, how do you, on the left, you have a completely different situation. There's no way we're going to find that group of philanthropists with those interests in going against their own interests in the end, class-wise. I'm trying to say, how do you, if you can't find in the end game market-based solutions.
You need class
You
traders.
can't find
Can I
market-based
respond to this?
solutions.
Right, alright, so just like when I ran for office, I ran against the Brooklyn Machine. Nobody thought I would win except for Bertha. Bertha told me, Kevin, I got you, we're gonna win this election. But I tell people all the time, money is not the sole determinant of who wins elections. It's not until Obama that we've gotten a phenomenon when Democrats have been able to catch up from the money raised. It actually began with Terry McAuliffe and Clinton. But that's a whole other story too, because he was really good at raising money. He was horrible at running campaigns, which is why we lost Congress, right? Because people know how to run money. So we always had people who knew how to run campaigns. They ran good campaigns, but didn't have money. Bill Clinton got a fundraiser. He knew how to raise money, but then he relied on consultants. Consultants then went to the things that made them money, and that's why we started losing elections. My point being is that we don't need as much money as they do.
Exactly.
That's right.
We just need enough money to get our message out.
That's right.
And so we don't have to match them dollar for dollar. We just need to figure out what we need and go after those dollars. And that's actually very sustainable within the echelon of people we do have to have money from. And actually, the more that you actually do that and do good work, believe it or not, there's going to be a few other people, and you'll get more. Because again, if you're talking about the 99%, if you got $1 from everybody in the 99%, you'd have as much money as you need. So we have enough money, right? We just don't focus it and we don't give it.
And yeah, and the rich guys, those people, they're not the only pool to go after. We do need to build and on the left, take self-sufficiency seriously. Like the black Muslims, you can say anything about them, but they're bean pies. Save them.
Right.
But I will bet you that nobody in this room understands how Acorn was able to have raised thousands of dollars from working poor people. Does anybody have any clue how that happens?
I was an Acorn organizer, so
Anybody who wasn't an Acorn organizer, you have any idea how that happens?
And you can read that in John's book.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
good.
I had a question. My name is Josh Pierre. I'm a candidate for district leader in Flatbush, Brooklyn. And we were at a voter registration meeting just yesterday, and we're discussing, okay, well, how do we raise money from our community? How do you articulate to someone who is on public assistance that give me $20, I will fight for smaller rent increases, and in the end you save $150 at the end of the year because you get a small increase. There's still a, what am I going to get out of this type of mentality from our community? And I think you know exactly what I'm talking
Well,
about.
first of all, and I think John's point is this. That's all we organized was poor people and people on welfare, and we went door to door to door, and people organized out of their own self-interest, and and the two things move them: fear and gain. The other thing is it's not a bargain like that. Here's the other thing that you got to realize. You say, we need to fight to get whatever this is. If it's tenants, we need to beat and kick this landlord's ass. Okay, what do we need? Are you ready to fight? Good. So here's what we need to do it. We need to buy this, this, and this. So, are you ready to join? Yes or no? Now, here's organizer math in our formula. And organizing, and you know what? Our side, we will have to work harder. You got to knock on 60 doors a day, get in and sit down and talk to 10 and sign up 2. You're looking for that 2. We don't have to organize and have all of the money or the majority, because society has already programmed folks that you're looking at and that you're talking to be apathetic, not to get involved. That's why you're on, you're looking out of 60 doors, you're looking for that 2. But if you find that 2, you've got that 2. We've got to also do the hard work. If you don't knock on the door and you don't go out to see people, you won't know what their self-interest is. Let people tell you what they're interested in. If they're interested in garbage district leader, you need to, don't be telling people you should be interested in getting rid of Vito Lopez. You should say, okay, let's go and get this garbage picked up.
We got it. But here's the thing that I find fascinating about this conversation. More than 100 years ago, Alex de Tocqueville said that what's fascinating about America is that people operating in their self-interest do what she just said. That they operate in their self-interest for the common good. And during the First World War and the Second World War, people went door to door to raise money, to build campaigns, to get people to give to the community chest and the federated chest, etc. So this is not new information. It's forgotten information. And people saying, what's in it for me? That's a fine question to me. Because it is about what's, especially when you're a poor person, what is it in for me that I should give my money to you? But these are questions that have been asked generation, but part of the problem is we are not transmitting that information over generations. And that's why we keep going in these circles. But this is not new, and we should have been answering these questions.
Aside from organizing people, individuals, not only organizations, but doing the Acorn style door-to-door organizing, Acorn did these reports, and this is, they came out with the redlining report, they came out with, they warned the nation about predatory lending before anybody else was doing that, they told us that this shit was gonna happen, I see in the Black Institute, when I read about what their plan is, is partly is to do reporting and stuff like that, so we're on the verge of this massive legislative change in New York City with, we're changing from number 6 fuel to whatever, and there's a big push to run gas lines. These streets are going to be dug up, sidewalks torn apart and stuff like that. We're going to go in there with the promise of jobs and stuff like that. Yeah, we're digging and we're putting in gas lines and stuff, but there's other ways to go, and there's nowhere can you find reports or any studies how many jobs there are in the green sector, how many jobs will be coming if we did something different, if we approach it a different way. While the oil companies, the gas companies, and all of them will tell you there's going to be tens of thousands of jobs in this stuff. It's crazy, and I'm just hoping that the Black Institute will, do that. Some reporting. I know that the studies, it was crucial for Acorn, and facts does help.
Well, that's where and that's why we're doing this.
You're absolutely right. They're always going to have more money than we have. But we are always going to have more people. You're talking about how to get 50 cents out of each one of our people. And going door to door is one way. If you're in a little community district or a little electoral district, you have an action that dramatizes what people's problems are, and that 50 cents is coming in. You do something wonderful, you just, even for one day, if it's the sanitation, if it's the housing department, if it's the project, if it's the drug traffic, you do something that people notice in your neighborhood, and they'll come around.
Brag about
I
it.
am thinking, yeah, you gotta let them know. You don't need a big media to do this, you can start small. I mean, we learned this lesson ages ago, and you're absolutely right. But that's why I'm thinking, and my question always has been, and I got very uncomfortable talking about the money instead of the people. And organizing, you started with organizing, but we didn't finish, we got off on the money. I have a feeling that 501c3 status might be a trap. What do you think?
It is a
Should we
trap.
avoid it? I get requests for money, and they always say, if you want this used for political purposes, don't do it this way, do it that way.
Yep.
And so I do. I mean, that's them, that's not us. Reformers will always abandon us. So, well, do you think it's a trap, or how should we do it?
No, I think we have to have different tools in our toolbox. I think we have the tool of a C3, C4. I think, we've got these 527s. I think we use the Citizens United. I think we need to have different tools. And I don't think we should not rule and cut ourselves off. To be smart about stuff. However, C3 is restricted. But you gotta understand that is restricted. So if you are a C3, then you better put yourself together and have a C4. Understand what you need to do and use those tools.
Okay, going to you.
My name is Susan Davis, and I'm a legislator in the House of the Vermont Progressive Party. And I wanted to speak to, I ran in my district, and I was the first non-Republican representative in 17 years. I beat out 2 Republican incumbents. And the way that I did that is that I knocked on every door. I knocked on every door, and I told folks that I felt that working folks had lost their voice in Montpelier, our state capital, and I said that I was there to hear from them, to listen to what their needs were, and I did that on onesie-twosie dollars. So it's very important.
Yes, you can ask. You, in the blue shirt.
Me? Okay, good. Yes, NEA, I'm a teacher. What I wanted to say, I'm also a legislative action person in my district. What I wanted to also say is that you live this every day. In your conversations, not necessarily, first of all, you have to feel it and you have to believe it. It comes from here, and when you have a conversation with people, they feel that in you, and they start listening to you, and they start hearing you, and they start passing that on, and that is what I have done. I have been doing this. I live it every day. I can get into a conversation, and somehow we segue, we can come back to where you were, know the issues, speak to that person and what it is that concerns them, and let them know how this can help you. It isn't always about the dollar. Do you have a half an hour on Saturday? Maybe you can help with so-and-so. And that's how you have to do. You can't go full Monty at people because then they turn.
No, you have to feel it. However, to be honest, and we should have an honest conversation in this room. Money matters. Time matters. Hard work matters. How we treat each other on the left matters. There should not, just because the other side has all the money and uses money, we need to talk about money. Because again, we have to be organized. Everything needs to have its place. And folks, let's talk about money that helped us. When I said we accounted for 25% of all the voter registration in this country, here's how we got to that point. People said that our members didn't vote, but because we were organized, ACORN members voted. Then people in our community, they would say they don't vote because no one came to their door and knocked on their door to register them. But we didn't register them by any party or whatever. We registered them by issue. We moved 1 million people in Florida to raise the minimum wage in 2004, even though people in Florida voted for Bush, and they were against the minimum wage. So we strategically we made a decision to invest in voter registration. That helped us to build our organization, but we moved people on their issue, not on, Democrats and do the right thing. That's why we became dangerous to Karl Rove. We were the progenitors of Attorney Gate. And when you ask, we got to be honest with ourselves. Karl Rove put us right in the crosshairs because now we were infringing on that thing which is where the real power is, politics. You see, we weren't supposed to move people, and rather than us knowing and recognizing if you're going to go into this area, Acorn, then the backlash is going to be X, and you need to prepare.
Okay, so since we are saying that we want to be honest and frank in this conversation, let me ask you this, and let us ask each other this. You brought about the success in Florida of raising the minimum wage, which was not done by just black people.
That's right.
Why, if you say there's a lesson learned from the successes, not only the failures, but the successes of Acorn, would you form the Black Institute? And if you, since the last speaker is a teacher, the reason that teachers have pensions in this country is because of the Carnegie Foundation and the foundations that came together before. You've got to understand the history of these things, and said, teachers, we need to create a pool of money that allow teachers to retire and give them benefits, right? So there's been a theme of philanthropic investment in a lot of the things that now we hold dear and hold on to. I wonder about the lessons learned. If we're going to create a multicultural society, and Acorn's greatest success, many would argue, is what happened in Florida, which was a broad-based, multicultural moment, cross-class, in a heavily diverse, multilingual space, that the chief organizer opts to do the Black Institute.
Because here's the other thing. What was Acorn? We focused, we had a focus. We only organized low and moderate income folks. However, just because we organized low and moderate income folks and 99% of our members were black and brown did not mean that we couldn't be multicultural, multi-ethnic, and do and attack issues
So is
that
the
went
Black
at,
Institute a diaspora organization?
The Black Institute says we are looking at things through a prism, through a lens of black folks and people of color. Because, and so that doesn't mean that the Black Institute isn't writing reports, doing research, doing data and polling to ferret out issues that could be broad-based for everyone. We're saying people of color, or going to be the majority of this earth and the majority in this country, we don't have some separate sort of issues, that the issues that affect us, affect other folks, and that, like this sister said, people, just because it's the Black Institute doesn't mean that I don't need or want white help the members, because I believe, just as Acorn did, work that the Black Institute does, has to go beyond. Here's the thing, we had a philosophy. When we did a campaign, and I take this philosophy with me, when we did a campaign, it had to benefit our members directly, but it also had to change public policy. Usually organizations either benefit their members or their constituency, and that's who they do, or they only do public policy and really they don't know whether things benefit. This is in my DNA, and I wanted to carry this into a new organization called the Black Institute, because I stood in 2009 and we were cleared off the decks beginning in 2008, and I don't think it's a coincidence that a space was cleared for the Tea Party. And this is when we began to hear, oh, America doesn't want universal health care, and we began to see these folks with the attack on us. And I said, we used to joke in Acorn, like, when there was a poll, we used to say, ha ha, and call Acorn members. So when I heard this, the Gallup poll or whatever poll, America says it doesn't want universal health care. And I said, what America are we talking about?
Bertha, don't you think that you gave up a lot by rebranding yourself in this way?
Yes.
Because you had developed over decades an umbrella view of representing any number of constituencies of working and middle class people, and you've given that up for this.
No, because I do not accept that. Again, Acorn was a black and brown organization and who did issues and ran campaigns that mattered to our black and brown members that also benefited everyone. And that is also the mission of the Black Institute. But I did decide that people were talking about being post-racial, and we weren't going to tiptoe around race.
So we're going to have a very brief. Roseanne, you get a chance to say something.
No, actually, we can't do that.
We got 5 minutes till next session.
Okay, and then
abandon this place.
So
is somebody going to come in here?
I don't know. I'm got another.
Okay, so Roseanne, and then Senator Parker, and then we're going to wrap up.
I just wanted to say a quick thing.
Introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm Roseanne Adderley, and I was going to say I'm a friend of Maxim, but I'm a slavery historian. Most days I do Amnesty International organizing, a lot of it against the death penalty and some other things. But I met Maxim doing anti-apartheid work in the 80s when we were students. And I would say, I wanted to comment on something that this woman here, Natalie, I think brought up, and the response to it. I do think that the lesson that we're losing with this media age is to talk the language of solidarity. More than one, and we have to keep doing it. It's not about papering over our differences. I tell people all the time the most profound thing, I'm an immigrant, but I was raised by black nationalists in the Caribbean. And it wasn't until I came to this country, it never occurred to me as a very bourgeois, spoiled, I am 45 years old, third generation college educated, which is very rare. It never occurred to my parents that the interest of every black person on this planet was not my interest. And that's the language I was raised with. If we are raised with a language as the left, that the interests of poor people are our interests, that the interests of the left, even those of us that are communists and socialists, and we have stopped doing that, and it is to our detriment. The second thing I want to say is I live in New Orleans, Louisiana, and even the conservative people in New Orleans, Louisiana were shocked at the way Acorn was treated, because when no one was there for poor people in that town, Acorn wasn't there.
So before we go, just want to make two points. One was that as it relates to kind of what's next, right? Kind of in the reimagining of Acorn, you really have two organizations. You have the Black Institute, right? And you also have these Communities for Change organizations around. So we have New York Communities for Change, which is doing a lot of the work traditionally done by Acorn. So it's not like the space has been abandoned, that there are in fact still organizing, and I suggest that people get involved. We're here in New York with New York Communities for Change, because they're still doing a lot of really, really great work. This panel is about inside-outside strategies, and then I just really want to make a last point about what we ought to be doing and examples about how it worked. When you look at inside-outside strategies, the Occupy Wall Street movement in New York State, even though it wasn't necessarily directed at New York State, wasn't necessarily directed at what we were doing, had the effect of bringing $2 billion additional dollars and a tax cut for middle class and working class people because that presence was there. We have a governor who is going to be governor. He wants to be president. He is not operating so that he can be governor again. He can be governor without doing anything, right? He wants to be president. So he's trying to play himself as a financial, fiscal conservative and a social liberal, right? So this was a hard thing, but the Occupy Wall Street presence made it necessary for him to do something different. So we got people say, oh, we gave up $5 billion. We didn't give up $5 billion because we were getting zero. We got $2 billion when we were going to give up $5 billion, right? That's what we got out of it. And that was a good example of what we could do when we worked inside, outside, despite the fact that it wasn't good coordination between those on the inside and people on the outside. Let me show you a poor example from this week. We just